things, a bug that was put in my ear was get on Twitter and check out writing community, check out reading community, and check out where readers are, where writers are, and see what other people are doing. And so when I got on there, it was very overwhelming. I went from being the only writer I knew. I've mentioned that my uncle is an indie writer, but he lives in Florida and I don't talk to him much. But I went from being the only writer I knew, basically, to being in a sea of super talented, super creative, super cool writers. And for a period of 6 to 8 months, at the end of last year, going into this year, I definitely struggled with imposter syndrome. Hey, this is Writers Row. I'm DC Wright-Hammer.
I'm David Gane.
If you like what you've been seeing or hearing on Writers Row, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure to like this video, give it a thumbs up, and definitely comment down below. Oh, and hit the notification bell on YouTube. It'll let you know when new episodes come out. This is the first episode we are mentioning that we are on podcast. We're on Spotify, Google Podcast, and eventually we're going to be on Apple. I don't know if it will be there by the time this airs. But wow, I just had Google look something up because I mentioned it.
Yeah.
That was crazy. They're listening, and you should be listening. That was on my phone because I said Google Podcast, and then it brought up a Google Podcast. Anyway, this show is off to a great start, David.
You know what I love is that it wasn't me doing that this time. So, thumbs up.
Hey, Murphy's Law. If it can't happen, it will. So yeah, there's that.
What are we talking about, DC?
We want to do an episode about imposter syndrome. So in writing community, and it's not just what writers have, but it's this idea that you've gotten far along in something, you've had some success in it, and people have praised the work you've done, maybe even said that you're really good at something that you do. And in your mind, you feel like eventually people are going to figure out that you're a fraud, that you don't deserve where you're supposed to be. In fact, you're not the expert. You're not as good as people have been telling you are. You're not. You're just not what you've been built up to be. It doesn't mean that it's true. This is more of a psychological, they call it imposter syndrome. It's something that happens in the minds of anybody. It has come up quite often in writing community. So I wanted to spend an episode digging into it and, kind of offering some support or things like that for people who think they have it.
Okay. So do you have imposter syndrome, DC?
I do not any longer, I would say. I have had a history of psychological issues and things like that, and I think imposter syndrome kind of crept in. It was after I was writing my first book, and I had never published anything before, and I was not even very well read or anything like that, and so I was like, what do I do? And at the time, I was super interested, so I dove back in and wrote another book. I'm like, the only way I can really reconcile anything right now is to just keep writing. And so I did that. And then came marketing. I had to figure out how to actually sell books. Book one was not super successful. I didn't have a ton of sales. I had quite a bit, but I'd like to have sold more books, especially in prep for book two. So I started doing marketing, and one of the things, a bug that was put in my ear was get on Twitter and check out writing community, check out reading community, and check out where readers are, where writers are, and see what other people are doing. And so when I got on there, it was very overwhelming. I went from being the only writer I knew. I've mentioned that my uncle is an indie writer, but he lives in Florida and I don't talk to him much. But I went from being the only writer I knew, basically, to being in a sea of super talented, super creative, super cool writers. And for a period of 6 to 8 months at the end of last year, going into this year, I definitely struggled with imposter syndrome. Even going back, I actually wrote imposter syndrome into a character in my second book because I was feeling it and I needed an outlet for it. So one of the main characters is this accomplished doctor, and the feeling that he has in his mind that he's never really made his own discovery in science. He's only guessed the next step from other people's work, and people have just given him undue praise, he feels, and he's one of the most renowned doctors in the world, scientists in the world, and he just feels like someday people are going to figure out that he's been winging it the whole time.
I feel like this is all full of spoilers, but keep on going.
No, that's just a theme in the
Okay.
book, part of the character. But no, I think I definitely struggle with it. And
You struggle with it, did you say?
Struggled, past
Okay.
tense.
Okay.
I mean, there's always in the back of my mind, like that feeling, but the actual physical manifestation of that of imposter syndrome is really no longer like you really feel like you get physically scared or you feel ill to some extent when you get put in a position where you think you're going to be quote unquote outed. And that I've only had that a couple of times when I was put in situations like doing like first book signing and different things like that. You really feel it. Haven't had that in a while, and so I think that I've overcome it. Before we talk more about that, though, I actually wanted to see, have you had imposter syndrome, or do you currently have it, David?
As well, of course, as you were answering, I'm like, have I? If I have, I've already forgotten that I did. I don't feel like I have it. Nor can I think of a time. Well, the only time I actually kind of remember it was when I first started teaching, because I was like, I'm still trying to figure it out, but here I'm talking about it and trying to help others with it. But I would always kind of just go back to this is where I'm at. This is what I know. This is what I'm trying to do, is to help you guys not get stuck in your writing. That's where I always that's kind of my fallback position, is always, don't be me and not write for 15 years. And if you have the interest or energy to want to create a story, then let's just get you on the path to doing it. And here are the tools that I have. And then I just kept on filling up my toolbox so that I'd have better and better tools. Now I feel like my tools are really strong, and I like going in and talking about them because not a lot of people seem to talk about them. And they're applicable to all different groups. I do notice I'm given unique challenges in my new job right now, where I'm meeting a lot of different writers and who are trying for different things, not necessarily my genre or.
Can you tell whatever. People? Are you able to tell people what your job is, just so they have some context?
Yeah, I'm a writer in residence at the Regina Public Library in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, just to narrow it down.
Not the other Regina. Don't get them confused.
Oh boy, that joke is done.
I didn't know it was a thing, but go on.
We hear the joke so much. There's a couple of other versions of that joke that maybe I'll tell you off camera, because
I was just saying there probably isn't another town named Regina. That's the joke I was making. I don't think I was making the joke you thought I was making.
I thought you were making a different joke. But there are, I think, other ones. And then we also are mispronouncing Regina. It's supposed to be Regina. So
fair enough.
Beyond that, that's what I do for a job right now, where I'm basically doing one-on-one consultations. And I'm always just I always go back to, I'm one person. This is, my range of knowledge. This is my point of view to what I feel the writing is doing.
Mhm.
and you may listen to me, or you can say, yeah, I disagree, and you don't have to listen to me. That's why I always like in when I'm doing classes, having like a group reading, because that gives you multiple different points of view, different backgrounds, all that kind of stuff, which will definitely inform your writing. And so for me, I don't know if I feel a lot of just imposter syndrome in my writing or in my selling of my writing. I don't. And it's interesting because I was listening to a podcast. Jordan Harbinger was interviewing Brian Glazer. I think it's Grazer. He runs Imagine Entertainment. Has been like the producing partner of Ron Howard for I don't know how many years, like 2 decades, 3 decades, a
Mhm.
long time, right? And he was telling this story where they had just won all their Oscars for A Beautiful Mind. They were just about to go into a room full of all the press, like hundreds and hundreds of press and cameras and everything like that. And he says, Ron leans into him and says, "Do you think they'll figure us out that
Right.
we don't know what we're doing?" kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, so it's definitely there. And maybe I'm waiting for that moment that somebody's gonna say, "Oh, you don't belong here," but I'm not really. Like when I
Yeah.
get the opportunity to meet other writers, because I'm not. I'm gonna do one of those things that you always hate about me. When we were doing some award ceremonies recently, we were getting to meet some other writers in the community and everything, and I'm always fascinated because when I start talking to them, they have the same things going on that we're having going on, right?
Right.
Yeah, they may have written a lot more books um,
Sold.
or
Sold.
won a lot more awards
Right.
or sold a lot more books, but they still are like, yeah, like they're just trying things out and just have different experience levels, right? So,
Well, and I think that's true that if anyone's going to figure somebody out with imposter syndrome, they're going to figure out that you're not the only one, and that um, these famous people will end up in the same room as their idols, and suddenly they feel, even though they're famous and they've achieved some level of success and they've been validated time and time again, they get in a room with someone that they idolize, and the role's a little flipped. And they feel this like, oh no, that's my idol, they're going to figure me out, that I don't belong with on that same level. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that happens. I think we're human, and so we do want we want people to like us in general. Unless you're a sociopath or something like that, you generally want people to like you. And so when you put yourself out there, you're at risk of not being liked. And then maybe some people have given you positive feedback. And that starts to swirl in our minds, in the minds that we have in, the 21st century, 2019, where you're not sure if somebody is being honest, if they're trying to take advantage of you, if you've had any kind of history of being taken advantage of. Putting yourself out there can feel very risky. And so you might find a niche of friends who really build you up, but you're not sure. You're still not sure if what they're saying is true. The confidence inside yourself might feel very frail. And for some people, I think that never goes away. For some people, I think they're just waiting for someone to figure them out. And that's a tough life to live, right? Um, I think there's actually like some good side to it too. There's like trying to be humble with it, right? You're trying to be humble with your work, and so you don't want to put yourself on the same, oh, that's the super rich person, or that's the person who sold 1 million books. So even though I've sold close to that many, or maybe people are comparing my books to them, I don't deserve any of that. I'm too humble for that. And so there's a level of humbleness that can roll right into imposter syndrome, I think. And I think that's a sort of a positive, like you're trying to be humble.
Yeah,
That can
absolutely.
fall into the trap of, well, now I'm just insecure and people are going to expose me as a fraud. Like, I think that that's the kind of way that people can take that.
I I think also for me, I never, and I'm saying this from my point of view, and I'm hoping I can kind of spin this into something else. But for me, I don't expect to know everything, right? Everyone I meet, I'm going to learn something from. And so I'm never I when I go out there and meet people like that, I'm not like, "Oh, I'm the best," or anything like that. I'm like I'm just kind of open to the experience of, "Oh,
Right.
here's a person who has this many books, has sold this many stuff. Let's have a conversation with that person and be honest with them." Um, and I do I do fear that people who sometimes you were kind of talking about, meeting these people and you're looking up to them and everything like that, and then you're kind of finding out, oh, they have similar concerns and stuff like that. But also there are those people out there that are like, yeah, like I'm the best. I've
Right.
worked hard. I deserve everything that I've done and all this stuff. And I always feel like that sometimes is a little bit of ego talking there.
Yep.
So when you're talking about, having a bit of humble, having a bit of a humble nature, I think that's not a bad thing to be, because the flip side of it and having overconfidence in these situations doesn't help you grow as a human being either,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I think that's the other pitfall is, and I think honestly, there's people that I don't necessarily know that I've found somebody like this, but I feel like it was the case that I've seen people who try to overcompensate for their imposter syndrome by doubling down on it. Basically, um, like they'll go out of their way to take a lot of pride and all that. And I think we all should take pride in our work. We all should feel good about it.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, you've
and
done
we
the
shouldn't let
work.
people take that from us. I think you should have these levels of success that we've talked about in other episodes where you hit it and no one can take it from you. It's already happened. You've written a book, or you've written a manuscript. You haven't even published it. No one can take that from you. You've done it. You send it to an editor or you query that. Nobody can take that first experience from you. Like, there's these things that you can do. And so some people will take it to the nth degree and say, you know what? No, I'm the best. I'm the greatest. My stuff, people aren't buying my book. There's something wrong with them, or something like that. And I don't think that people think that, oh, you should either be humble or the opposite of that is to be on the other extreme. And I think there's some middle ground there where you can be a genuinely good person. You take pride in the work you've done, and when people give you compliments, you're gracious. I actually try to be the most gracious person in a conversation. And sometimes I'll get in what I call a grace off with people where we try to be the most gracious back and forth. And then it just, that nobody wins in that case. Uh, but no,
No, you're right, DC. I am the most gracious. So
I don't
that's good.
know
No,
because,
no, no, no. You're right. You're totally right. I'm the one.
well, okay, fine. You could be the most gracious, David. In fact, I don't try to be as gracious as you. In fact, I'm in the presence of greatness. So,
You're
uh,
right. You're totally right.
um, so on that note, we could probably transition to some ways to cope, right? I think I started to talk a little bit about that. But from somebody who I don't know if you have any, you don't haven't suffered from imposter syndrome, or you don't think that you do. What do you think, from your perspective? How should people deal with this idea that they're going to be exposed as a fraud?
Um, You know, and I'm actually going to come back to Jordan Harbinger because he always talks about it, and I always think about it from that point of view. But for me, I agree with what you said, which is that you've done the work, so embrace that and celebrate it. Yay you for that step, right? I think part of my trouble is maybe I'm always looking, okay, I've learned that thing. Now what's the next thing, right? So whenever I get into these conversations and I'm like, oh, do you think a person's going to catch me out? I think if they are like, oh, you don't actually know this thing, I try and own it and say, okay, yeah, I don't.
Right.
But this is my opportunity to learn and grow and that sort of thing. So I think going into those situations and saying, okay, what can I get out of this situation? Not in like a give me, but how can I grow? How can I learn? Yeah, it might be terrifying, but I'm going to put myself into that place, and just being honest is always a very good strategy in my mind, right?
So
And
you're all,
actually, I have to say, we've done a lot of these conversations, and we've had some really wonderful people who have all this vast range of experience. And I love these conversations because I'm learning from them and everything like that. But I also am like, oh, you know what? But this is the way I've experienced this problem or whatever, right? So we don't need to all take the same path to that end goal.
well, I was going to say, it almost sounded like you were put your goals in front of your ego or in front of your pride. Put the goals out there in front and let them soften any kind of blowback you might get as a person. Because, I'll be honest, David, you slid into my DMs almost 7 months ago, and there was literally no pretense. Once I got over the fact that there was an internet stranger um, in my DMs, you were asking great questions. You were authentic. There was no sense of, number one, the scammer alert goes off in my head when somebody does that. But no, you were very
I'm
honest.
playing the long con right now.
You're right. You're gonna just tap into my bank account and just take all the money. You will be a thousandaire. Not even. Anyway.
Exchange rate.
Exactly.
Oh,
Okay.
wait, I think that works against me.
Either way, um, and I think that that's it. If you can, your goal was to exchange information, to get information, and to build a relationship to some extent. Like you saw somebody in me, and you didn't think I was a complete jerk, I guess. And
You answered an honest question, and that was why I'm like, okay, let's have a conversation with this guy.
sure. And I think that's what others need to kind of think about. If their goal is to get published, if their goal is to sell some books, you kind of have to put the goal out in front of you and let that drive whatever you're doing. Because if you're leading with like an ego, if you're leading with yourself and you're like, oh, of course you do have to sell yourself at every point, but you're there to achieve something, whatever that is. And so, as I was saying earlier, you do these things, you put yourself out there, and nobody can take that from you. That experience happened. You are that person. It is part of who you are. And if someone tries to expose you, that's where I think you were saying own it. And that's one of the things I love about this show and now this podcast is that we have a fairly public, very public platform to broadcast our authentic ignorance. And I mean ignorance in the definition, the actual denotation of it, in that we just don't know. We bring experts on, like you say, that have all this knowledge. And I get excited because A, they're cool people from Twitter or in, other places in some cases, and B, they've got some cool information, perspective, knowledge on something I don't. And so I like using this as an opportunity to learn, and that's actually washed away any kind of semblance of imposter syndrome that I've had. Um, and it's made me a lot more comfortable in just letting people know I don't have all the answers. I'm not well read. I have written a couple of books and I kind of still don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to keep chugging along. And you people know who I am now. People have, if that's fraud in your mind, I can't help that definition in your mind. This is who I am. I'm struggling like everybody else. And if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, I think you need some kind of support system. You need somebody to reach out to, and you need to put those goals in front of you. I think that that's kind of how I've dealt with it, and it's worked really well.
And if you want someone to help you out, you just slide into DC's DMs and
They're
he'll
open.
totally do that.
They're open.
Um, there was a couple of thoughts that I had. Um, I do think that there's that. I think it's okay to be scared of things,
Hmm.
which I think is a kind of the source of a lot of that imposter syndrome. The fear that you're going to be found out, the fear that you're in over your head or whatever, right? And the thing that I've learned, it's always just kind of leaning a little bit into that fear. I'm not saying jump totally in if and drowned and that kind of thing,
Right.
but you know, for me, I like going in front of audiences, but I used to be terrified of going in front of audiences.
Sure.
Um, and it's just been a slow process of it. Doing pop-up shops, really early on, Ange and I realized, oh, wait a second, if we're gonna try and sell books, we got to get past being shy and timid and sitting back and trying
Right.
to bring people to our table, right?
Yep.
So you know what this is a really good one. Ange and I did business cards early on when we did our first book, even before when it was like the old cover and everything. We had these business cards, and it was this whole process of like, oh, I should probably get out my card and give it to this person and sell my book to them. I feel like this is less about imposter syndrome and just about fear. But anyways, we're gonna keep
Right.
on with the story because I was always awkward and I overthought it all the time. And I got lost in my thoughts and then the moment was gone, right?
Mhm.
This last weekend when we were traveling, I swear it now is just it's come so easy to me that I don't even realize I've done it. So Kate and I, my wife, we were stuck down in the underground tunnels of Toronto. Like everything's connected underground with shops and stuff. And we were stuck in the Bay, which is a very Canadian choice of a company. And we were trying to find our way. And this guy came with his wife and a stroller or baby in a stroller. And he was like, "Which way do I go?" And I was like, "I think we're trying to figure out the same thing." And we split. And then we both found help and then ended up running into each other and saying, "Oh, I think we're supposed to go this way and we're supposed to go this way." And we both decided to go the same direction. And I'm walking with him and I swear we were only with him for 3 minutes. By the end of it, I had already pitched my book, given him my card,
Nice.
and moved on. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what the hell? Like, where did that come from?
And after the 3 minutes, you're like, "What happened? I blacked out."
Pretty well. Like I just give my card. Like we got these cards what? I in like only a month or so ago and I already burned through my set and had to go buy more and I gave some to Ange more and she's like I haven't even touched my first set and I'm like I don't know they're just going like they pour out of here and right now I'm like there's not many left in here this time either so
Right. And you're doing the work and you're getting your name and your book's names out there. And that's what we have to do some way, somehow. If our goal is to sell books, you've got to market your books. You do have to market yourself. And to a certain extent, I mean, the phrase "fake it until you make it" plays into this episode really well
But I
because
want to say no. Why not just be your genuine self and say, "Hey, you know what? I don't really know this thing, but hey, I wrote a book. Do this thing." Right? Oh,
right.
I'm going to do a talk. How did I get here? We all have a path. We all kind of stumbled our way into becoming a writer. Just tell your version of that story. And the one thing I will say is every time I've done my teaching, I've been in situations where I'm like, I am talking out of my ass, and I realize that I need to get better at this. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll take an L on that one. And then the next time I do that class, I'm gonna bring it way better. And it's funny, I'll have students, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot in this episode. I had a student that just came to me, like an old student from, I don't know, like 7 years ago, who was sitting and talking with me, and I said, "Oh, so I'm going to talk to you about this concept." And I go, "But I've talked to you about this before." And he said, "No, never heard of this before." And I'm like, "Oh, you're one of those students, which means you're the old students that I wasn't very good. I didn't have my
Yeah.
material as best as I wanted it to be." Now I'm like, "Yeah, let's do this."
But
It's always let's do this again kind of attitude.
I don't know that I'm going to disagree, but I'm going to take a different angle at the phrase "fake it till you make it," in
Okay.
um, that it can be a way for people to get over the fear you were talking about.
Yeah.
They should just not stay in the fake it, category of that, or the fake it part of that phrase. They can use that as a way to say, you know what, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to pretend I know how to do it and dive in and figure it out. But eventually you do make it. And that's what I was talking about earlier in those tiers of accomplishment, that you aren't always faking it until you make it. Eventually you've actually made it to a small goal, or you've achieved the success that you've defined for yourself. Um, so, um, so I think that that's actually not the same thing as imposter syndrome. It can be used as a tool to help you get over imposter syndrome by embracing the fact that you know that you're faking it, that you know that, yeah, if someone asked you, hey, are you really the expert you sound like? You would say, no, I'm faking it till I make it. And I think a lot of people do that anyway. I think naturally you're just like thrown into a situation and you just have to respond. And some people respond well, some people don't respond so well and they have a bad time with it. Um, but that's where you give yourself a break. You were faking it. Like, you, of course, you're not going to do well, right? Because you were faking it. If you did do well and you were faking it, guess what? That's good too. So there's really no way to lose by trying new things and faking it till you make it, in my opinion, my spin on that phrase.
Yes, and I will say though, you can fake it till you make it sort of thing, but also when you do, when you know that you could have done better in that last interaction, then just grow and learn from that, right? Don't let the ego get in the way to be like, oh, I'm perfect. I don't need to learn this thing. No,
It's
go
true.
out and learn it. Figure it out. Bring better version of you to the next conversation.
And so basically, even though you're faking it, you should still have high standards for yourself.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I agree with that wholeheartedly, David.
Yeah, well, not too high of standards. We don't want to get people like crushed and stressed out over that, because then we have to do a whole new episode.
I'm okay doing a new episode on that. Do you have too high a standards for yourself on the next
Yes,
Writer's Row? I can't guarantee that'll be the next
and
Writer's.
then it's just like I'm gonna be the thumbnail.
I'm gonna put that same thumbnail of you giving up on your dreams, David, where you're ooh. Um, and on that note, we should probably wrap up. Where we've been pretending this whole time. Really, people are gonna actually know on this show that we've been imposters. In fact,
Yeah,
I'm actually David Gane, and David Gane is actually DC the whole time.
I'm truly an imposter.
So, David, you're really good at promoting. What do you have to promote for this episode?
You know what? I am going to oh darn. I should have planned this better. I'm gonna promote the two people who beat us in our two competitions.
Go for it.
Colleen Nelson wrote a book called Sadia, which was about a young Muslim girl growing up and going through high school from Canada. And oh my goodness, I forget our other wonderful author. I'm gonna go on the Twitter for 2 seconds really quickly because I feel so bad.
Bad YouTube, David. Bad YouTube.
It is so horrible YouTube. Okay. The other writer is Courtney Summers, who wrote Sadie, which is about another young girl going out to avenge her sister's murder.
Oh.
I read them both. I really enjoyed them both. They both deserved to win the competitions that they won. So yeah, I have to say I actually met Courtney, and she was a lovely person, and yeah, I'm looking forward to reading more of her stuff. And I've read some of Colleen's stuff before, and I've spoken to her on Twitter, and that's about it. But cool. Yeah,
we'll get the links to those in the description down below if people want to purchase.
I'll have to send them to you.
Okay, I guess, yeah, we'll do that. I'm going to promote the channel. If anybody's still watching at this point, they're probably subscribed.
They are.
If they can do us a favor, make sure to go back and thumbs up. Leave us a comment. Those comments are really fun for us. Hit the notification bell if you haven't. It's next to the subscribe button that tells you when you have new episodes that are uploaded. And then if you prefer this in a podcast form, you never watch our faces anyway, we're on Spotify. As I had mentioned before, we're on the Google Podcast, and there's a few other platforms we're on. Eventually, we're going to be on Apple Podcast. That's coming soon, so keep on a lookout for that.
That's it.
That's all I got, David. Thanks for your time.
You know what? That was fantastic, DC. You did an amazing job.
I don't know. Maybe I did. Maybe not.
No. You're not an imposter in this situation. Okay. You are the heart and soul of this show.
Well, I appreciate that, David. Thank you. And thanks everyone else for watching. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye.